Hello, welcome to the West Ham Way YouTube. Myself, Mark Carlaw. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, Mr. Robert Banks, an author, of course, Irrational Hatred of Luton. Now, this was a book that a flatmate of mine put onto me many years ago, and I read it and loved it. And I ended up buying then quite soon after, Robert, An Irrational Hatred of Everything, which, to be honest with you, your books... For people that don't know, they're brilliant reads, but they take you down a real emotional journey, don't they? And it can be quite tough at times to read, but brilliant as well, I must say. And I do need to also read some of your other books as well. But Robert, before we get into the West Ham and where we all are now, firstly, mate, how are you and how has your summer been?
Yeah, thanks for having me. First of all, summer seems to go on forever, and now it's gone. It seems like it was a lifetime ago. Yeah, it was great. Long hot days, barbecues out in the garden. No football to worry about.
That's the bliss, isn't it? That's the dream, really.
Yeah, you're not looking at the schedule and thinking, oh, we've got a game on Sunday at 4:00 in the afternoon. What a pain in the arse that is. But
it's just dread, isn't it? I mean, like, even though we are now, you get these weekends where you think, oh God, it's coming up now. Although I do love my football, there are times when, especially when things aren't going so well, you do worry. But yeah, you're right. That summer was pretty epic, though. I can't remember a better summer, to be honest, in my life. Quite amazing. Did you go anywhere at all?
I'm old enough to remember 76. So, okay. but I was only 8.
Oh right. Okay, yeah. I see.
We were gonna go away, but flight got cancelled just as we were going through security, so we haven't. We didn't risk it again. We'll go to Brazil in the new year.
Fine, sounds good. So on the subject of your, looking back at your childhood and the early days, Robert, can you tell us about your first experience of West Ham and how you ended up becoming a lifelong West Ham, a loving West Ham fan?
Yeah, I mean, it really goes back to the 75 Cup final, and my dad buying a colour television on the day of the Cup final.
Amazing.
And first thing I saw on a colour television was claret and blue. Claret and blue against Fulham in the Cup final, and first thing I saw in colour, or if it was. My dad had a friend who he worked with who was a West Ham fan, and he was there that day as well, and that sort of added a little bit of interest. And so from that day on, and of course they won, from that day on, I always followed West Ham's results. And then this friend of my dad's in 78 took us both to a game at Upton Park. My dad wasn't that bothered really at that time. He wasn't really into football.
Okay.
But I kept sort of nagging him, nagging. Can we go again? It wasn't until I was 15 and I was able to go on my own and go with my friends that we started going regularly, and that would have been start of the 83-84 season.
Oh, fantastic! Really well. It wasn't soon after that we actually had one of our best ever seasons, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought that that 83-84 team was potentially better than the 85-86 team, and going into the new year, the turn of the year, they were in second place and only a couple of points off the lead. But then, of course, Alan Devonshire picked up that really bad injury that ruled him out for the rest of the season, and I think Alvin was out for 6 weeks as well after a car crash.
Right.
Had those two injuries not occurred, I think we could have maybe gone one better than. Who knows? We could have won it maybe that year, but certainly we could have matched third or maybe even been second that year. That was a cracking team when it was firing on all cylinders. Still had Brooking and Devonshire in midfield, and a very young Tony Cottee up front.
Absolutely,
with Dave Swindlehurst before he turned into a cart horse.
Okay. Oh, mate, magical times. I mean, I remember that, and I'm pretty sure, wasn't it? After the 85-86 season, wasn't it? Then we sort of nosedived straight away after that. Typical West Ham fashion. We don't really ever seem to maintain, a decent spell, do we? It always seems to be followed by a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, I think the stat that was trotted out last year was that in the club's entire history, that was the first time we'd finished top 7 in 2 consecutive seasons.
Right.
Quite
Okay.
often we'd finish top half,
Yeah. Absolutely.
and then struggle the following year. And historically, it's been through sort of resting on the laurels and a bit of a lack of investment. I mean,
Absolutely.
even going back to '66 and the World Cup, there's stories of Bobby Moore going into Ron Greenwood's office and saying, "Right, what we're going to, we've got 3 players that have won the World Cup. Who else are you going to bring in?" And Ron Greenwood sort of saying, "Well, I've got 3 players who won the World Cup. Why do I need to bring anyone else in?" Even though they'd only finished 18th, the previous year or something in a 22-team league and stayed up by the skin of their teeth. No sort of appetite for improvement or investment. It felt that way. And again, after 85, 86, I think John Lyall sort of took the view that he was always looking after the club's money and didn't feel that he wanted to spend a lot of money. And in the end, they didn't buy. I don't think they bought anyone in the summer after 85, 86. And it was only in the January they forked out for Stuart Robson, who wasn't really the player we needed. And it just went into, Cotti got disillusioned, wanted to go, and then McAvenny left shortly. Oh no, McAvenny went first, didn't he? And then Cotti got disillusioned. Right. He went, and unfortunately, the die was cast from that moment on.
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it? I mean, and even in my time as a West Ham fan, it always felt like that. We always seemed to have a very good season, and it was followed by a sort of like, it always felt like doom was on the horizon, and you could never sort of maintain it. It was a bit of a shame. Your writing days, then, I mean, I understand it that you got into your writing. Was it via Overland and Sea as well? You did some writing for Gary Firminger. Obviously, that came to an end. When we moved stadium, sadly, Gary decided to pack it in, which was understandable. What's your thoughts on the move to the stadium then? I mean, is it something that you feel that it was a positive change for West Ham, or do you look back and think, no, we wish we'd stayed at the Boleyn, Upton Park?
It's funny because when I think in about '89 there was a questionnaire sent out in the programme asking what our thoughts would be, what would the fans' thoughts be on a move. And I think it was mooted at the time that we might well move to the area where Millennium Dome is now, which, and the thought of going south of the river obviously was far too much to stomach for the fans, and they rejected it wholeheartedly at that time. In principle, I wasn't against the move. I'm not a local, and I don't, so I don't have that attachment to the Boleyn, but obviously I do have an attachment because so many happy memories there. But having said that, the Boleyn of 2015-16 was a very, very different building to the one of 1978, 1983. So you could argue that every time a new stand went up, a little piece of the place died a little bit. That said, in hindsight, don't like the new place. It's easier for me in terms of a journey. But just don't get that feeling, do you, when you walk in? We've had the occasional absolute stormer there, like that first season against Chelsea in the League Cup, and
absolutely,
the Seville game last season. Fantastic nights, but on the whole, I feel that although you've got 60,000 people in there, it's almost like it's taken a negative step in terms of atmosphere because of the distance to the pitch.
It's a bit of a bodge job, isn't it? It feels a bit, the stadium to me. It feels a bit like it's all a bit clunky and put together. It was a bit rushed. It wasn't.
I mean, when you see what Tottenham have done, it's a bit like, let's have a look at what you could have won.
Absolutely, yeah. which is a bit
I think
painful.
it is very painful.
Mm.
I would rather have stayed at Upton Park and had, maybe redeveloped the east side if we could have
Yeah,
done.
absolutely. I think
My
that was
only
a lot of fans' faults, really.
my only reservation there is that it is a bit unfair on the local residents. It's to increase the capacity even further. You've got a situation where it's a very shoehorned into a residential area there, and I think you have to take that into consideration as well. Unless there was some compulsory purchase of some of the streets in the surrounding areas as well to make more space for facilities. I mean, that aspect of the new stadium is good in that it's in the middle of nowhere. The transport links are fairly good. There's a big apron around the outside of the ground for dispersal and gathering of fans before and after. But in terms of the atmosphere inside, just doesn't compare.
I agree. I totally agree. I mean, it's quite interesting to talk about that then, that, obviously the move was quite controversial. It still hasn't been taken great by some fans and many fans. And, although, as you say, we've got some good memories there so far, but yeah, I mean, it always feels like, there's still a lot of work to be done. The summer, obviously, the board spent a lot of money investing in the playing staff and seemed to, sort of show quite a fair bit of ambition. Do you think that the board have done well in terms of trying to turn things around with the fans, or do you think no, it's too little, too late?
It's always difficult to know what's going on with the thought process in terms of which players come in are players requested by David Moyes, which players are recruited by Rob Newman, whatever his role is, and which ones are purchased by at the behest of David Sullivan because they're some sort of vanity project or he's getting a backhander from an agent or something.
Yeah.
Allegedly. You can't argue with the amount of money that's been spent. Whether it's been spent wisely, I think, remains to be seen. You certainly also can't argue with the reputation of the players that have been purchased. I mean, Carlaw is a German international. We've got 2 Italian internationals come in. Of all the signings, maybe Cornet is the one that has actually looked the most impressive on the minutes that I've seen him play. Although Scamacca in the European games, I think has looked very good. He's just not been deployed. He's not been deployed correctly in the Premier League. I mean, it's been a good summer. I think the problem we've got now is that we're paying for a lack of activity in the previous 2 transfer windows, and we're bringing in 7, 8 players. Whereas if we brought in 2 in each of the transfer windows, you've got less bedding in to worry about. You've got more time for the players to get to know each other and their style of play, and you've got, I do worry. I think that the success that we've had over the last 2 years has been built around a very solid team unit and a team spirit. I worry that when you bring in a block of players like we have done, that could get splintered, could get cliquey, could get difficult. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I think if we'd invested a bit more in the previous 2 transfer windows, I know the argument has always been, well, the players weren't available then, and it would have been a question of buying for buying's sake. But maybe they just weren't trying hard enough. I don't know.
I mean, I agree. I think that, as you say, it's been such a huge transition with the amount of players they've brought in, not to mention the sort of key figures that have left the club. And I think it's a key factor as to why we've started the season the way we have. Very slow, and we are struggling, and we do need to get some results on the board. Obviously, David Moyes is currently in the spotlight with this now. What's your thoughts, Robert? Can you see David Moyes turning this around? Do you think he's got a long-term future still at West Ham, or are his days numbered, as it were?
Yeah, it's another difficult one. I mean, you see the debates that are going on social media, and it's quite polarized, isn't it? I mean, I believe he still has enough credit in the bank to give him to at least the end of this season. I don't believe that it should be a question of reviewing things at the World Cup. I think he's certainly got enough about him, and the squad that we've got there has got enough about it for us to stay up easily. Yeah, this might come back to bite me on the backside, but we've got enough there to, there's easily 3 teams worse than us in that league, and we'll stay up. There's no two ways about that. What happens in the summer is another matter, and I think it will depend a lot on the nature of how we play over the rest of the season, and how the new players bed in, how he manages that, and also how we do in the Europa Conference League as well.
Absolutely.
At the end of the day, I'll take 17th right now if you guarantee me that Europa Conference League trophy, because
do you know what? That's a good point. That's a very good point, and something I really wish I should have asked you. Really, yeah, that's a very good point, and I think you're right. I think a lot of fans would. I think a lot of fans say Premier League survival just fine, but we get a trophy. I think, yeah, I agree with that completely.
I mean, the majority of West Ham fans in that stadium have never seen West Ham lift a trophy.
Absolutely.
Or they were too young to remember it. So, I think we deserve that.
Absolutely. It's time, isn't it? I mean, it is time that we lifted a trophy. So I completely agree with that. Going on to then this weekend, Robert, Wolves at home, massive game. The issue that's sort of surrounding David Moyes, especially with West Ham fans at the moment, is that is regarding team selection. That he's favouring certain players that he's being loyal to that possibly he shouldn't be. Fans feel like. What's your feelings on the selection then? Is there players in there you think that are just not quite performing, or do you think no, stick with them and they're his trusted side? What are your thoughts?
I think the difference with a manager to players is that it doesn't matter how much credit players have got in the bank, and this is what England managers down the years have got to have. I thought Southgate had got the hang of this, but it seems that he hasn't. Is that it doesn't matter how much credit a player's got in the bank. If they're not on form, they're not on form, and you shouldn't play a player and say, I'm going to play him because he's done well for me in the past. Souček is a case in point. Apparently, he had an absolute mare playing for the Czech Republic a few days ago, and they got absolutely hammered by Portugal. And he missed a penalty last night. Did he miss a penalty last night for?
He did, yeah. Well. Missed the penalty, and they lost, yeah.
Last few games I play, he's looked, and I don't know what he got up to in the summer, but he obviously, I don't know. He seems to have lost his mojo seriously. And
I agree.
And there was Paqueta.
Yes.
When he came on against Spurs, I thought he looked great, but against Everton, he looked hopeless. Having said that, again, before the game, I noticed that he did pick up a knock in the warm-up, and he was limping around. And I just wonder if that had affected him. But he's clearly a class player, and this is what I'm saying about the signings being, you can't argue with the quality of the signings. And if Moyes can't get a tune out of them, then his position does have to be questioned. But that question shouldn't be asked till the end of the season. I think that there are a number of players there at the moment that aren't performing to the best of their ability, and far too often it's the manager who gets the blame for that. And I suppose the manager's job to motivate them, but it's also the manager's job to put them in the correct formation and play pick a formation that works and select the players for that formation, not try and squeeze players into positions that they're not used to, just because, again, they're the manager's favourites. So I do think he is guilty of having his favourites.
Yeah.
Cresswell's another one who I think is quite a way past his sell-by date now. And from what we saw of Kehrer in the Germany game last night, I think he's got to be knocking on the door for a start at right back.
I completely agree, mate. Completely agree, especially the way Soufal's been playing. I think, absolutely.
So I've forgotten what the original question was, but because I rambled so much.
No, it's fine. I think you've kind of covered that in terms of who the players that you want to see swapped over, and you're right. And
Antonio's another one. Antonio's another one that seems to be lacking in a bit of gumption. Gumption? How old am I? He just lacks that sort of oomph that he had start of last season. And the point's been made again several times that this has been a calendar year thing, not a this season thing. Back end of last season, they were tailing off badly, and I think he needs to bring the new boys in and drop. I mean, Bowen's another one. We could go on and on and on.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of underperforming players, especially players that we've been so reliant on and have been usually very consistently good for us. It's a strange season so far, and we certainly need, like you say, we've got a fair bit of new blood in this team. So you'd like to think that Moyes is going to start being a little bit daring now and start putting them forward, because relying on the players of the past seems to be backfiring massively, especially when they're out of form. When we talk, before we wrap this up, Robert, I have to ask you, Wolves. Then, what is your prediction for Saturday?
Yeah, it's not going to be pretty, I don't think. Yeah, I think both teams they're just one place above us, I think, aren't they?
They are, yeah.
Yeah, I suspect a 2-2 draw.
Okay,
and it won't be a pleasant watch.
No, I agree. I actually think it's going to be a tough watch, tight, very, very. Both teams desperately not trying not to lose. My gut feeling is 1-0 West Ham at the moment, but. Although I have predicted 2-0 elsewhere, but my confidence. The thing is, this is what happens to me. The closer I get to the game, the nerves start getting to me. So a little while ago, I was quite confident. I think we were going to cruise to a victory, and now I'm starting to doubt it. And probably by Friday, it'll be a draw, just like yourself. Robert, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. As always, we have met before, and I do hope that one day you'll come back onto the show and we can talk a little bit more West Ham. But this time, hopefully, we're doing well at this stage, which I'm sure we will be.
Lovely, thank you. Can I just mention the YouTube channel that I'm doing? It's not a competitor because it's all historic stuff. No, the John Lyall years. If you type the John Lyall years into YouTube, you'll come up with. At the moment, I'm on episode 29. 15-minute, 20-minute clips of the best manager we ever had. Starting in 74, coming all the way through to 1989 chronologically, and covering every single game.
Sounds fantastic. Do you know what? After this, I'm going to jump straight onto it. I'm looking forward to that.
Go for it.
Looking forward to it. Robert, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
Take care. Look after yourself. Cheers, mate.
Cheers. Bye-bye.